With all the comedy we've had these past few episodes, episode 11 felt a lot more serious, and we're finally entering the climax of this season. Mordred pulling up and summoning Ragnarok along with most of the town being destroyed is setting up to be a pretty hype finale, and I absolutely can't wait to see what will go down and what Shadow will do. But I'll get back to that later. Let's talk about the rest of the episode first. As usual, the episode starts off pretty goofy. Margaret has that gorilla grasp on Sid. We all know she's trying to get a piece of his atomic. And Epsilon proceeds to join in, and he just shadow clone jutsus his way out of it and starts performing on the piano half naked. As if the ass cheeks the other episode weren't enough. Gotta love how he always finds a way to be a goofball. Sid goes to, I guess you can say, investigate Rose's mom and perv asshat's whereabouts, only for him to catch them making out with each other and discussing their plans on dealing with Rose. I've already said my thoughts on Rose's mom in the last review, so you could go check that out if you're interested. Anyways, the way Shadow just came into Rose's room just like that was one of the toughest entrances I've ever seen. He just sits there and drinks her tea. Also, I find Rose's tone switches pretty interesting between when she sees Sid and then seeing Shadow, especially now that she's a Shadow Garden member. I mean, her VA was kinda cooking in the booth though, with that fear and sense of intimidation in her voice. I like how Rose immediately realized she shouldn't even dare to try and attack Shadow with that slime weapon of hers. She put that shit back the second she took it out. But Shadow's actually wild for this. He takes Rose to go see perv asshat laying the pipe on his mom and then proceeding to talk shit about her. And this man Sid just monologues his Shunibi lines about her becoming the tyrant while Rose is just going to hyperventilation. Although I think the puking was a little over exaggerated. I don't really understand why they do that in anime when the character should be crying instead. So Rose passes out and he's just like, sorry I guess. Dude, I swear you can never take this man seriously. With that not playing out as well as he expected, it's time for plan B. While Rose is coping, Sid magically brings up a fucking piano to the balcony and monologues over his millionth playing of Moonlight Sonata. Although I did actually end up helping her getting the motivation to act. Now I almost question the fact of her not noticing the whole Shadow voice he did at that last line, but I can't forget that the characters in here are dumbasses. Their brain just glosses over obvious shit. The protester scene was crazy though. It was absolutely wild how the guards actually started shooting people on spot rather than just threatening to do so. It was a small irrelevant scene to the rest of the episode, but that was so crazy. We get one last bit of comedy before all the fighting begins. Perv asshat's reaction to him finally noticing the ring is gone was absolutely hysterical. He had to do that shit 3 times to make sure he wasn't tripping. Despite being an asshole, he has the funniest reactions out of all the characters. Moving on to the ceremony, Rose finally decides to stand on business and challenges perv asshat. Surprisingly, when she puts on the ring, it plays a message left by her father, basically exposing perv asshat's schemes, as well as declaring Rose as his successor, making everyone including Margaret, who's talking all that shit about Rose betraying the kingdom, fall in line. What was actually crazy was how Mordred was in disguise as a priest or pope guy doing the marriage vow stuff. And I know I keep talking about crazy, but we gotta talk about the craziest and best part of the episode. Mordred cutting off Rose's mom and perv asshat's heads. That shit was so funny. It was so satisfying to see Rose's mom get murked. I knew she had it coming for her, it was just a matter of when. Mordred summons Ragnarok, which honestly if you think about it, kinda looks like a Yu-Gi-Oh monster. I can't exactly place my finger on which monster though. This man Shadow was out here playing the fucking boss music himself. Like how much more levels of Chad can you be to play your own boss music? He's literally been doing this shit since the ceremony started. So the end of the episode was setting up for Shadow versus Ragnarok and maybe Mordred as well, with Sid slicing off Ragnarok's arm with his threads, which I noticed it had like a robotic arm since there's wires on the inside. So was it like a cyborg / artificially made monster? That had me pretty curious. Someone let me know in the comments if you happen to know. Anyways, this was a phenomenal episode as always. Really looking forward to the finale. That callback to episode 1's events near the end of the episode was brilliant. Despite it practically being the same scenario, I love the change in details with how Akane's kidnappers are now cyborgs. Instead of stylish Thug Slayer, Sid comes in as Shadow saving the day. No crowbars this time, it was just raw hands. And with a movie on the way, I'm looking forward to seeing what approach they take to adapting this arc. Although I'd be lying if I said I prefer that over them adapting it through season 3. The episode was of course amazing, but this approach to Saf took, despite already having adapted the segment at the start of season 1, was my biggest highlight. Alright, enough of that said, let's talk about where we left off at last episode. Shadow out here giving the toughest introduction to Mordred with the Shadow Garden members in disguise amongst the audience, while Sid is fighting Ragnarok, Beta and Epsilon are facing off against Mordred. The amount of disrespect they were throwing at his face, exposing his ass about him having all those artifacts over him, was kind of funny. Anyways, as I just said a bit ago, Margaret is finally falling in line now. After talking all that shit and her attitude, now she treats Rose with the respect she deserves. Also, it's not an Eminence episode without Sid's witty remarks. Never fails to make us laugh with him making a joke out of his battles along with mocking the opponent, while he casually just manhandles them without breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, Mordred gets rolled immediately by Epsilon and Beta, and of course starts molding about it. More importantly, all of these Round Knights motherfuckers, whatever they were called, are all dumbasses. Epsilon and Beta bait him into spilling information about the Cult of Diablos' goal. So honestly, he could have avoided losing if he wasn't so overconfident in himself, along with him meat riding Ragnarok. I'm just saying, the Cult of Diablos would have a better hand to play if they just use their brains. Okay, so we finally get that lore drop regarding their goals, and they introduce a whole new realm of shit that changes and yet explains a lot of how this world works and the origins of its magic. Basically, there's a multiverse. One world with magic collided with the current world, bringing the foundations of magic and everything possible in the current day. Which that fact alone is pretty crazy. Honestly, I think the manga might have cut this out. Then again, I'm not entirely sure if that was explained there or not. It's been a while. This probably won't be explained until near the end of the series or just way later. Mordred explained there being a center that all these worlds are revolving around. It would be really interesting to find out what exactly is at that center and if Mordred's prediction about it being a god would actually be legit or not. Now, I'm kind of wondering if elves, therianthropes, and all those other races were originally a part of this world or were a result from a collision of other worlds. Because Mordred brings up the theory that since humans were able to adapt to these changes in the world, that they could also potentially originate from another world. In that case, I'm guessing this world was just like the real world at some point before the magic collision happened. It was just dinosaurs, mammals, and other creatures before human civilization came and evolved. It's a very interesting theory to think about. Also, maybe I'm wrong and just misinterpreted what he said, but Mordred said that the creature that became the demon Diablos was originally a visitor from another realm. Does this mean Aurora was never originally from this world? If so, that is kinda insane. Anyways, there were a lot of lordoms discussed, but the cult's primary goal for destroying Oriana in the first place was because the king didn't offer some of Rose's blood to the cult, which for some reason they wanted, in exchange for them having saved Oriana a long time ago, when they opened up one of those realm gates accidentally. Also, what did I say? Mordred was heavily gassing up Ragnarok only for him to be torn apart by Shadow's threads. Mordred's reaction was kinda funny though, not gonna lie. Goofy ass reaction. He entered next level copium not being able to face the fact that Ragnarok lost. So he decides to fuse with Ragnarok into this weird looking humanoid monster thing. Even though it didn't matter in the presence of Shadow-sama, he clapped Mordred up real quick with that atomic. Speaking of which, aside from his ridiculous monologuing trying to say some cool shit on the spot to give the atomic some lore, I honestly thought he was about to pull a Frieza and blow up the fucking planet. But then I realized he put up a barrier before unleashing it. Not gonna lie though, would have been actually fucking beyond crazy if he did blow it up. Also, I love that Mordred's last words were, huh? Straight confusion before he gets obliterated. Anyways, enough of my rambling. I'm just glad we got to hear some GOAT ASMR atomic to wrap up the season. So that artificial gate Mordred opened was still there. Sid, not knowing what it is, goes into the portal and along with Beta ends up back in his original world. Anime onlys may not notice, but Beta was originally supposed to go with Sid since she followed him to the portal. Apparently they mentioned her going in with Sid and Kage jutsu, but I don't really know what approach they're trying to take with that and how they're gonna explain how Beta is there in the movie. Honestly, they should have just included it in the episode to make it less confusing. Finally, as I mentioned at the start, we have entered the best arc of Volume 4. It's great to see Akane again and hear Horiyui's peak voice acting. Akane mentioned she was in her 20s, so I'm assuming it's been like 3 years since Sid's death in his original world. Now, I probably don't need to state the obvious, but considering how Sid's OG world looks now, it looks like a post-apocalyptic setting, so I'm assuming after a while, after Sid's death, maybe a year or two, this world collided with another world that had magic as well and ended up in this situation. And since this is is so new to everyone, obviously they're not gonna know how to utilize the magic abilities properly and whatnot. So there's probably gonna be hordes of magic beasts that they have to end up fighting. To be honest, I really thought the anime would just start from Sid and Beta's perspectives after ending up in the original world. It was a very interesting decision to do a different take on episode 1's events. But yeah, I'm assuming the movie is just gonna cover all the stuff that happens after Sid ended up there and maybe finish the arc in one fell swoop. Or another theory I've heard from a light novel reader was they were gonna adapt the prequel, which is in regards to how that world ended up the way it is now, and then adapt the rest in season 3, which I personally wouldn't mind if they went that route. But yeah, what did you guys think about the episode, and what do you think is gonna go down in the movie? Let me know in the comments.